Let me start first with Antonio Brown. You know, when you look at this deal right now, is there any way to say that Antonio Brown did not completely get over on the Steelers?
He stuffed Pittsburgh and the Steelers in a locker, Jim. I mean, this was an unbelievable power play by Antonio Brown. You know, when he first started demanding the trade, you think, okay, you know, this is a disagreement between the two sides. This is going to be something they work out. Ben and Brown, hash out their differences, figure out a way to make it work. And worst case scenario, Brown, ends up getting some sort of raw deal from the Steelers because that's how it works for players. They almost sent him to Buffalo, NFL Siberia, and instead he manages to negotiate and basically demand his way to Oakland. And look, I get the Raiders aren't good, but they have a decent quarterback situation. They made him the highest paid wide receiver in the league. And the worst part for the Steelers is Antonio Brown did all this while submarining his trade value to get basically the same compensation for Antonio Brown that you got from Martavis Bryant after seeing Amari Cooper go for a 1 this past year. That's debilitating for the Steelers. And, it's going to be real rough when the Raiders go out and sign Le'Veon Bell and then beat the Steelers in the playoffs next year.
Will Brinson joining us. You laid that out perfectly. I mean, the thinking had been that AB was destroying his trade value. It was going to hurt him. But not only did he reportedly block that trade to Buffalo, he ends up going to Oakland where he wants to be and getting more money in the process. As you lay out, what I want to know, Will, is how in fact did this guy do this? How did he pull this off?
It's actually by virtue of the timing, Jim, I think, that he turned on the Steelers, right? Because last offseason, before the 2018 year, they needed some cap space. And so the Steelers restructured his deal to basically make it, where they were going to have to take this $21 million cap hit. And if they hadn't done that, it would have been a lot easier to say, listen, AB, we're out of here. We're bailing on you. Go figure things out yourself. And I think, honestly, that he saw what Le'Veon Bell did last year. I mean, Le'Veon Bell bodied the Steelers, too. He didn't ultimately, he passed on $14 million, but at the end of the day, he got his freedom, and he got to walk away from the Steelers without actually playing for them in 2018. And Brown said, listen, I'm going to play chicken. I'm a superstar. Someone will want me. I'm not going to let you send me to Buffalo. I just won't sign, I won't show up, and that means they won't make the deal. I'll let them be known. Drew Rosenhaus worked this, on the back end magically, and the end result is the Steelers lost two of the 10 best offensive playmakers, skill position guys in the last 5 years over a 12-month span. It's crazy.
Will Brinson joining us. All right, so if he, in fact, AB, went to school on Le'Veon Bell, does this mean that others will look at what he just did and follow suit? In other words, is there now a playbook for what you want to do if you're a superstar and you've got some leverage, or do you feel like that's a one-off that can never be duplicated?
No, I think this is a little bit of a blueprint, both those guys, Bell and Brown, in terms of how you can act towards your team if you have the proper leverage. Now, let's look at Deshaun Jackson, for instance, right, as a semi-comparable. There's a trade rumor right now, ESPN reporting the Buccaneers are trying to trade him. The only difference is Deshaun Jackson is 32. He's not the complete receiver that AB is, and he has zero guaranteed dollars left on his contract. He only gets $10 million this year. So the Buccaneers, they're not going to, Deshaun Jackson can't play chicken with them, right? They're like, look, dude, we don't owe you any money. We'll just cut you. See you later. The Steelers couldn't do that with Brown. And if they had a malcontent in Brown hanging around the locker room, causing issues with Ben Roethlisberger, causing issues with other teammates, stirring things up, creating drama with Mike Tomlin, and they had a $21 million cap hit. They also had the $2.5 million roster bonus due on March 17th. There were just so many variables with that AB situation that I think this is one of those things where if you are a superstar and you're worried about your long-term future with the team, get your agent to go to them and get them to restructure like that so you can push some of that money. You get cash right away, and you can leverage them later in terms of your contract. So, yes, there is a blueprint, but it does need to be a special sort of situation with a particular type of high-end player.
Right, and a special sort of personality like Mr. Big Chest to pull it off the way he did. Will Brinson joining us. So from the Raiders' standpoint, Will, what do you make of the fact that the Raiders did not want to pay Khalil Mack in his prime, but they are willing to pay Antonio Brown?
Here's my theory, Jim. I think John Gruden came back and said, all right, John Gruden's the type of guy where you can see him wanting to rip apart a roster, remake it entirely in his own image. And that's what he was doing by shipping out Amari Cooper, shipping out Khalil Mack. And now I think what happened was he wanted to try and slow play this, believing he was a good enough coach to win early on because of his coaching skills, and then to get these young players who he's drafting to peak as this team got to Vegas in either 2020 or 2021. I also think he's enough of a psychopath, and I mean this in a complimentary Jim Harbaugh kind of way. I think he's enough of a psychopath that he's not willing to lose all those games, again this year. And so he said, all right, screw it. I'm going to go out and get some big-time talent. I'm going to go get these Steelers cast off, at least one of them. He trades for Antonio Brown. I think that the Raiders are going to be involved in Le'Veon Bell discussions, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw those two guys, Mr. Big Chest or Mr. Big Checks, we're not sure which one it is, joined by Lev Bell in Oakland. And then if you see what the Raiders have in the draft, they just signed Trent Brown, so they're spending big on offensive free agency. They might be willing to spend big draft capital on defensive players, and you can sort of talk yourself into squinting at Oakland and seeing them as a playoff contender if they do make all these moves. But I would guess at the end of the day, if you typically teams that spend all that money in free agency aren't the teams left standing at the end of the year. So I'm a little wary about it, but I like the aggression that Oakland's using here.
Will Brinson joining us for a few more moments. All right, so bottom line that. Do you feel like they're going to make a hard push for Le'Veon Bell? And if not, what does the market look like for him now?
I think it's going to be better than maybe people think. You have teams in the Jets, the 49ers, and the Raiders who are, I believe, will be interested in signing Le'Veon Bell, who have a lot of cap space, who have a need, and those teams competing against each other look, Le'Veon Bell is a running back, and I get why you don't want to pay running backs. But the reality is that Le'Veon Bell is a game-changing running back. He is a guy, he's one of the best pass catchers in the league. I think if you lined him up at wideout for a full season, he could have over 1,000 yards easy, like 1,200 receiving yards, just lined up as a wideout. And I believe he'd actually be a really good fit in John Gruden's system. And all it takes is one team, right? If you get one team out there willing to spend for him, and the Jets really want him and the Raiders really want him, it could turn into a situation where I think he can end up getting, that $30 million in the first 2 years that he wants, or that $15 million a year over several years that he wants, maybe even 17. I think 17 is probably a stretch, but there's going to be a good market for Le'Veon Bell. He's ultimately going to get paid, and I think we're going to look at his 2018 gamble to sit out the whole season as a pretty smart move because he saved his body and got a big free agent contract.